For 4 years, LIV Golf had all the leverage. They had the money, they had the momentum, and they had the players. Every week, it seemed like another name was walking out the PGA Tour's door, lured by guaranteed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, funded by one of the most powerful sovereign wealth funds on the planet. The Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund had committed to changing professional golf forever, and for a while, it looked like they might actually do it. But the money is gone, and the players who left are now quietly trying to come back. In 2022, Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund launched LIV Golf with a backing that exceeded $5 billion. The plan was simple and devastating in its effectiveness. Pay the biggest names in golf more money than they had ever seen. Pull them away from the PGA Tour and build a rival circuit from scratch. It worked. The defections came fast. Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, John Rahm, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, and Cameron Smith. One by one, they crossed the line. The PGA Tour responded with suspensions, bans, and locker room fury. Players who stayed behind watched their former colleagues cash enormous checks while they competed under the traditional system. Lawsuits were filed. A framework agreement between the two tours was announced in 2023 and celebrated as a potential peace deal. Then it collapsed, dragging negotiations into a stalemate that lasted years. Greg Norman, the former two-time Open champion who spearheaded LIV as its CEO, was eventually replaced by Scott O'Neill in early 2025. O'Neill came in with a mandate to grow the business, attract sponsors, and normalize LIV as a permanent fixture in professional golf. But by the time he settled into the role, the ground beneath him had already started to shift. The reason LIV Golf is now fighting for its survival comes down to a combination of forces that converged faster than anyone inside the organization anticipated. The regional war involving Iran created serious financial pressure on Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund. The PF's resources are vast but not bottomless, and a destabilized Middle East has a way of concentrating minds about where money goes. At the same time, the PIP unveiled a new strategic direction, a fundamental rethinking of its mission. For years, Saudi Arabia had used the fund to pour money into global sports and entertainment as a means of projecting a modernized face to the world. That approach is being shelved. The new priority is domestic investment, and any international ventures that survive the cut are expected to generate actual returns. E-Golf, which had done nothing but lose money in a foreign market that largely rejected it, was never going to survive that audit. The numbers tell the full story. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund spent more than $5 billion on LIV Golf since its first tournament in June 2022. The league was burning through approximately $100 million per month this year. It staged 14 events per season with $30 million tournament purses. And despite all of that spending, LIV never secured a traditional television contract in the United States. The audience it was trying to reach never fully showed up. The signs of strain had been visible for weeks before the official announcement. A scheduled LIV event in New Orleans was postponed. Reports surfaced that vendors and players had not been paid for recent services. During a broadcast from Mexico City, the live feed went down for roughly 2.5 hours. Earlier that week, press conferences had been canceled. Both incidents were attributed to local power outages, but against the backdrop of collapsing funding, they landed as something much more significant. O'Neill had repeatedly assured players and staff that funding was secure well into the 2030s. As recently as February 2026, Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the governor of the PIF, who was the architect of LIV, had told leading players in a private meeting that funding was confirmed until at least 2032. Then in April, everything changed. Al-Rumayyan resigned as LIV's chairman. An emergency meeting was called in New York. Executives, according to reports, were searching for what one source described as life rafts. O'Neill shifted his messaging entirely, telling staff in an internal email that the league was funded only through 2026, before adding in a TV interview later deleted from social media that future funding was not guaranteed and that he would have to work like crazy to keep it going. The reality is you're funded through the season and then you work like crazies as a business to create a business and a business plan to keep us going, O'Neill said. But that's not different from any other private equity-funded business in the history of man. With PIF officially confirming it would end funding at the close of the 2026 season, LIV Golf moved quickly to present a survival plan. The league enlisted investment bank Ducera Partners to take a restructured business proposal to potential outside investors. According to multiple sources, LIV is seeking financing in the range of $250 million to $350 million. The pitch includes a scaled-back operating model, shrinking from 14 events to 10 events, reducing prize funds significantly from the current $30 million per tournament and offering players equity stakes in the league as a way of aligning their financial interests with the circuit's success. LIV pointed to year-over-year revenue growth, sponsorships and partnerships up 40%, ticket sales up 129%, and 4 of its events projected to turn a profit in 2026. LIV Golf is firmly focused on securing a transaction that positions the organization for the long term, LIV spokesperson said. But the obstacles are enormous. The league is carrying hundreds of millions of dollars in guaranteed player contracts, including Jon Rahm's deal reportedly worth over $300 million, signed in 2023, and Bryson DeChambeau's contract reportedly worth more than $100 million. Bloomberg reported that LIV had begun evaluating bankruptcy as a potential tool for resetting its financial obligations, a mechanism that would allow it to nullify those contractual commitments. For any outside investor evaluating the pitch, the question is straightforward and brutal. What exactly are they buying? A league with no profitable history, no major U.S. television deal, and hundreds of millions in liabilities is a difficult sell, even at a fraction of what Saudi Arabia spent building it. As analyst Joe Pompliano put it goes without saying that there will be zero investor interest in funding LIV Golf in its current form. Against this backdrop, the question of what happens to LIV's players has become the defining issue in professional golf. And to understand where things stand now, you have to start with what the PGA Tour already did, and what it deliberately chose not to do. In January 2026, PGA Tour CEO Brian Rolapp, the former NFL executive who took over the organization in 2025, announced the returning member program. The criteria were intentionally narrow. A player had to have been away from the tour for at least 2 years and had to have won either the Players' Championship or one of the 4 major championships between 2022 and 2025. In practice, only 4 LIV players met those requirements: Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Jon Rahm, and Cameron Smith. The window opened in January and closed permanently on February 2, 2026. Players had one chance to walk through it. The terms were significant. Returning players would receive no payment from the FedEx Cup bonus program for the 2026 season. They would be ineligible to earn equity from the Player Equity Program for the next 5 years, from 2026 through 2030. And at the tour's specific request, each returning player was required to make a $5 million charitable contribution. Koepka was the only one who accepted. His return potentially cost him between $50 and $85 million in equity earnings alone, depending on his performance and the growth of the tour over the next 5 years. When I was a child, I always dreamed about competing on the PGA Tour, and I am just as excited today to announce that I am returning to the PGA Tour, Koepka said. I believe in where the PGA Tour is headed with new leadership, new investors, and an equity program that gives players a meaningful ownership stake. DeChambeau, Rahm, and Smith all declined. They chose to remain with LIV for the 2026 season, betting that either the league would survive or that the tour would offer them another chance at better terms. That bet has not aged well. Rolapp was direct about what that window represented. The program, the tour stated clearly, was not necessarily an indication of what the PGA Tour will do in the future for this or any other situation, but is instead a response to a unique set of circumstances. The door opened once, it closed, and there is no guarantee it opens again. With LIV's funding expiring and player representatives quietly reaching out to explore a path back, Rolapp sat down with the Wall Street Journal and delivered a statement that defined the tour's position with surgical precision. We're interested in having the best players who can help our tour, he said. Not every player can do that. 6 words. They carry the entire weight of where professional golf now stands. The PGA Tour is not opening its doors to everyone who left. It is not offering forgiveness without conditions. It is going to evaluate each player individually, measure what they bring to the product, and decide accordingly. The leverage that LIV held for 4 years has completely evaporated. Rolapp also acknowledged something more personal, the human cost of the war inside the tour's own walls. He admitted that while he personally does not carry scar tissue from golf's civil war, plenty of people around the tour do, and that it has to be accounted for in some shape or form. That is a CEO openly stating that the locker room is still wounded, that the players who turned down fortunes to stay loyal have not forgotten, and that any path back for the defectors will need to satisfy those people. He was equally clear that Koepka's return should not be read as a blueprint. Koepka called and said he was out of his contract and ready to come back. The tour considered it, but that was a one-time defined window, not a precedent for what comes next. If anything, future terms are expected to be more restrictive. and there is a specific group facing an even steeper climb. 11 players participated in the antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour during the height of the conflict. That group includes DeChambeau, Mickelson, Tyler Gutsch, and Ian Poulter. Rolapp told the Wall Street Journal that plenty of people at the tour have scar tissue regarding those players and that he expects that factor to be accounted for in some shape or form. Suing the organization you now want to rejoin tends to leave a permanent mark. Patrick Reed, who resigned his PGA Tour membership when he joined LIV in June 2022, is currently serving a one-year ban and will not be eligible to return until August 25, 2026. Henrik Stenson and Pat Perez have already returned, but only by serving year-long bans from their final LIV events. Both now play on the PGA Tour Champions, the 50 and over circuit. Phil Mickelson spent years publicly recruiting players to LIV, filed lawsuits against the tour, and repeatedly antagonized the organization that provided him a career for 3 decades. The likelihood of him competing in a PGA Tour event again is, according to those who follow the situation closely, extremely low. Dustin Johnson had earned lifetime membership on the PGA Tour by winning 20 times, then resigned that membership to join LIV. The path back for him is genuinely unclear. For the majority of LIV's rank-and-file players, those who never held significant PGA Tour status to begin with, or whose status has long since expired, there is no fast track. The route back runs through mini-tour circuits or Q-School, earning status the conventional way, competing against a pool of younger players who never left. DeChambeau and Rahm represent the two biggest and most complicated cases. DeChambeau's contract with LIV expires at the end of 2026. He was seeking a new deal with the league reportedly worth close to $500 million, a number LIV never seriously entertained. He remains the league's single most marketable personality, but he was also part of the antitrust lawsuit against the tour. A genuine wildcard in his future is the possibility that he steps away from organized professional golf entirely, leaning into his YouTube presence and media ventures rather than rejoining any tour. Rahm's situation is arguably the most complicated of anyone. His $300 million plus deal, signed in 2023, is widely considered to have single-handedly extended the conflict. LIV was struggling, negotiations were progressing, and then Rahm signed, giving the circuit a credibility injection that froze talks for another year. That damage is remembered specifically and personally inside the tour. He is also locked in a separate dispute with the DP World Tour over reinstatement, a fight that threatens his eligibility for the 2027 Ryder Cup. A Koepka-style return for Rahm would be a significant surprise. The far more likely outcome, as analysts have noted, is a return to the DP World Tour on whatever terms he can negotiate. As one columnist on Golf Channel stated plainly, Rahm and DeChambeau are coming back out of necessity, not desire. The players who stayed are watching all of this unfold with a mixture of emotions, and the divide inside the locker room is real. Lucas Glover, the incoming chairman of the Player Advisory Council, struck what has become the prevailing tone. He said he would never hold a career or personal decision against anyone, but then drew a clear line. Returning players should follow the same pathways and pay the same penalties as those who came before them. No exceptions. Rory McIlroy, who was once the single loudest voice against LIV, has made the most dramatic reversal. He has said that if people are upset or have hurt feelings because certain players left, who cares, and that the sport should move forward together and do what is best for the game. Even McIlroy, however, acknowledges there are a lot of bridges to cross before reunification actually happens. It is also worth noting that McIlroy reportedly learned about PIF pulling funding as early as March, before LIV players and caddies were informed. Adam Scott has taken the more measured position. He would not hold it against anyone who felt negative emotions about the defectors returning, and he expects some tour members to be genuinely upset. That reaction, in his view, is entirely legitimate. Former European Ryder Cup captain Paul McGinley captured the financial distortion that LIV caused across the entire sport. Tour now left with huge overheads driven by LIV and then used as leverage against them. The enhanced prize funds the PGA Tour built to defend itself against LIV's pull will now face serious scrutiny without the competitive pressure that justified them. The PGA Tour holds every card right now. It decides who comes back, on what terms, and at what cost. Rolapp has signaled that more substantive updates on new pathways for returning players are expected around mid to late June 2026. Whatever structure emerges, it will not resemble the returning member program. The terms will be stricter, the scrutiny will be greater, and the tour will prioritize players who actually strengthen its product. LIV's remaining 2026 schedule runs through August, concluding with the team championship in Michigan. Once that final event ends, Saudi Arabia's funding obligation is finished. Whether outside investors step in, whether the league restructures, whether it files for bankruptcy, or whether it simply ceases to exist, none of those outcomes change the fundamental reality that the era of guaranteed LIV money is over. The players who left are discovering that the road home is longer, more expensive, and far less certain than the road out ever was. The PGA Tour did not win this war by outspending its rival. It won by surviving long enough for the money to run out. And now it intends to set the terms for everything that comes next.